Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I thought that it would be kind of fun to do a deep dive into what is on my Kindle. I have downloaded 142 books on my Kindle and I have unread 52, read 93. So that is pretty cool. Let's go through this, and I do not think that I will be doing like a summary of each book because that would take forever. So my first book that I have on here is Nicholas Nickleby, and that was by Charles Dickens. I read this book so many years ago, I don't even remember, probably like 10 years ago at this point, and I think I liked it if I remember right, but I don't remember much of this book. So the next book I have is Lotus Buds. That was by Amy Carmichael, and I don't remember anything about that book. Oliver Twist, which is also by Charles Dickens, is the next book, and I would love to reread that book someday because it's such a classic. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I don't know how you pronounce that, but that was another classic that probably everybody is familiar with that I read a long time ago. Relationships, A Mess Worth Making by Timothy Lane and Paul David Tripp. And then a book that I had read, a long time ago was The Read Aloud Family, and I had the audiobook of it, and for some reason it's on my Kindle, but I don't know why. And then I guess I should also clarify that those books actually were books I had read when I was a Mennonite way back in the day, and then we were only allowed to read books that were either classics or books that were by Mennonite authors or books that were like very conservative. Just it was very particular what we were allowed to read, and so I didn't really get into novels until after I left the Mennonites and even a few years after that. And so when I started to get into reading, it was more like self-help genre or Christian nonfiction with a few novels and even classics sprinkled throughout. So that's kind of the gist of my book journey, and it's been interesting to say the least. So when I first started getting into novels, I read The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, which actually I don't think that's even a novel. I'm pretty sure that's based on a true story. It was actually a movie that my husband and I watched, and so I decided to read the book, and I did that. And I don't even really remember much of the book, but yeah, that was a book that I read. And then Anne of Green Gables. I have the entire set on my Kindle, and that's just such a classic, and I will 100% read that whole series one day. And I also would love to have the paperback copies too someday. And then I read a self-help book, The Naked Marriage by Dave and Ashley Willis. That was a good book from what I can remember, and I think I would actually reread it someday. And I read Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. That was by Nedra Glover Tawwab. I know I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I don't even remember what was in the book besides obviously about setting boundaries. And I read The Richest Man of Babylon. That book was a book that my husband read and he wanted me to read it. So I read it and it was good. And then I read The Wise Wife Blueprint. That was a marriage book that I read a long time ago. And then I read Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Again, I can't remember what was in it besides it was like how to heal and grow up, basically. This was a series of books that I had read quite a long time ago, and then I had decided to reread it. And it was called The Meeting Place by Jeanette Oake and T. Davis Bunn. So I had all 5 of them and I read them, but again, this was probably like 3 years ago at this point. And I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And then we have another movie to book adaptation. My husband and I had watched Red Sea Spies, and I wanted to read the book, so I bought it and I read the book. And I think that that was a good book if I remember right. And then I read Where the Red Fern Grows because we had read that book when I was a little kid in school. Our teacher had read that book to us, and I remember loving that story. So I got it on my Kindle, and I should actually reread it. It would actually be kind of cool to reread it. And this was a book my husband recommended, The Social Skills Guidebook. It was just like a really good book about how to learn social skills for those of us who may not have grown up with much in the way of social skills. And slowly but surely, we're making our way through the first part of my journey with so many self-help books and just a few storybooks sprinkled throughout. So the next book was Becoming Free Indeed by Ginger Duggar, and I have no idea how to pronounce Vuolo. I don't know how you say it. And then I read Gentle Discipline. I just wanted to learn more about like the popular views of parenting in this time, in this era, and I am not going to be making my thoughts public about it. I'm going to keep those opinions to myself, but that was why I read that book. We had watched the movie Catch Me If You Can at one point a long time ago, and I wanted to read the book, so I got it on Kindle and I read it. And then the next book was YouTube Secrets, because I had been working on building my vlog channel at that point, and so I wanted to read this book to learn about YouTube, so that was what I read. And then I read The Chronicles of Narnia, and I would 100% want to reread that series someday and maybe even get paperback copies. And then I read Don't Make Me Count to Three by Ginger Hubbard. That's another parenting book. And here we enter more of the novel phase in my reading. So I read The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. And personally, I remember that was like the first like novel book that I just really loved, and it was so interesting, and I believe it was following a woman in Russia, and I do not remember who the main character's name was, but it was just following her journey of being a sharpshooter, and it was actually really fascinating. And then I read Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Groeschel. I think that's how you say his name. And that was a very, very good book. And now we enter the novels more, and so we have Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. Personally, I disliked this book. It was definitely not my favorite book. So then we have One Woman's War by Christine Wells. I think that was, is it based on a true story? It might be. And I don't remember much of that book. I don't. But then I read How to End a Love Story, and here's the other thing. When I was starting to get into reading novels, I wanted to start with romance because I had been told growing up that romance novels are bad, just like straight across the board. There's no exceptions. And so I wanted to figure that out. And this journey helped me discover that not all romance novels are bad. You just have to use a lot of discernment in how to get into that genre. And this book was one of the catalysts in that, because How to End a Love Story has in my opinion, it has very in-depth spice scenes, and it's just not for me. And so this book definitely taught me that, and I learned a lot about the romance genre through this book. So, and then I read Wild Ones by Nate Johnston, and I loved that book. And I read The Deborah Mantle by Christy Johnston, which would be the previous author's wife, and I really loved that book as well. And it was both of those are Christian nonfiction. Then I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I liked the vibes. I liked that it was like a very sweet and tender romance, but something about it did not really sit well with me, and it wasn't my favorite book ever. Then I read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, and I think I actually gave this one 5 stars. Sorry if you hear noises, just my son playing. And so I read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, and I liked that book. It was pretty good, and I don't know if I would give it 5 stars now, but at the time I remember really enjoying it. I read The Friend Zone. That one is by Abby Jimenez. I'm sorry guys, I'm butchering my name pronunciations today. The Friend Zone, I don't think that was my favorite book, and I think it's part of a series if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and then I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and that was not my favorite book. I've seen a lot of people actually agree with me. It just was not my vibe, and I mean, it had a lot of nice fall vibes and stuff, but the story and the characters were not my favorite. Then I read Our Mothers Ourselves. A friend recommended that book to me, and I did enjoy it. and I don't know if I even remember what was in it. Then I read Sisters of the Resistance. That was another one by Christine Wells, and I think that was one that I did not enjoy because it did not meet my expectations. It's supposed to be focusing on Catherine Dior from Paris during the war, and I felt like it focused so heavily on just the other ladies in the organization and not so much on Catherine, and I was disappointed by that. Then I read my first Kristen Hanna book, and that was called True Colors. I really enjoyed that book, and I don't know if I would ever reread it though. It was kind of a nice read, but not like my favorite ever. And then I read The Happy Intercessor by Benny Johnson, and that was very good. And if you're a Christian, anyone out there who's a Christian watching this, I would recommend you read that book. Then I read The Montessori Toddler, and I think that was a good book. And I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Highly recommend that book. It's very sweet, and I can't remember if there's any spice in it. If there is spice, I don't remember, but I did love the story. It was very sweet and very cute, and it was just like very overall enjoyable. And I read my first Vari McFarlane book that was just last night, and I fell in love with that book. It was really good, and I loved the exploration of grief, and that romance was not the main focus of the book. It felt more like a subplot, but it was just very nice. So I did like that book. And then I read The Altar by Jeremiah Johnson. I honestly don't remember what was in that book besides it was a Christian nonfiction book. And then I read we're getting into the books where I haven't read. So this one I have not read, and it's called The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. And I just haven't read it yet because I did read her two of the books that were part of the Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I read The Good Girl's Guide to Murder and the other book, and they weren't my favorite because thrillers just aren't my favorite book or genre. So I just have not read that book yet. I read If I Never Met You by Vari McFarlane, and I don't think that was my favorite book. I had seen that Haley Pham loved it, and she was so obsessed with Vari McFarlane, and so I was trying out a few of them, and yeah, I discovered that Vari McFarlane isn't necessarily my favorite author, at least not that book in particular. And then I do have The Whole Brain Child that I have not read yet. And I also have Mad About You by Vari McFarlane that I have not read yet. I read The New Strong-Willed Child by James Dobson. And yeah, I'm just going to keep my opinions to myself about that one. And then I started getting into some fantasy here because I discovered that romance was not my favorite genre. And so I started getting into fantasy, and it was an instant hit for me. It was just like I fell in love with this genre, and it's still one of my favorite genres ever. So, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, there they are. I love these two books. They are a duology in a series. There is also Shadow and Bone, and there's King of Scars, and a couple other books that I would have to look up the reading order. But yeah, I definitely highly enjoyed those two books. And then I read Illuminate. Illuminate was a sci-fi, and it was way in the future where they have this planet that gets bombed, and these two kids who are in love escape, and they're on this ship, and then there's a virus, and it's a little scary, and it's very interesting. I would recommend Illuminate. And then I have An Ember in the Ashes that I have not read yet. And I have The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, which I have not read yet. I read No Drama Discipline. And then I have Profit First, which I have not read yet. Then I read Hello Beautiful, which I personally didn't enjoy just because I'm not like a fiction. Well, I can't remember what genre it is exactly, but I'm just not that genre type of girly. I don't know. I just didn't really enjoy it super much, even though I know other people probably did, but just not for me. And then I read I Can't Believe You Just Said That by Ginger Hubbard. I read Kisses and Croissants, and I don't know if I really enjoyed it. It was just kind of like a fun, cozy vibes romance type of thing, but it was so like teenager type thing that I didn't really connect to the characters. And then I have Never Split the Difference that I have not read. I have Dreaming with God by Bill Johnson. That one I really enjoyed and I would read that again. And then I have None of This Is True, and that one I have not read yet, but I'm kind of looking forward to it even though I'm not a thriller girl. It's something that I don't know, I just feel like I want to read that book and see what the hype is about. And then I read The Spectacular by Fiona Davis, and that one was an unexpectedly enjoyable book. Something about the cover, it's that book right there. Something about the cover did not attract me, but when I read it, like, it was actually surprisingly enjoyable and it was actually kind of a fun read. And then I read Dangerous Prayers, and I think that one was a little bit disappointing for me, actually. And then, oh, the next book that I have in this list here is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And I'm like Brandon Sanderson's biggest fan. No, probably not actually, but I genuinely just love him so much. And all of his books, like, I'm immediately adding all of his books to my TBR because he's just fantastic. So yeah, definitely going to read that one, but I'm reading the Way of Kings series first. And then we have Buy Back Your Time that I did read. That one was one that my husband recommended to me. And I read The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery, and that was not my favorite book. I just couldn't connect to the characters very well. Then I read Passionista. That one was fairly good, I think. And I read The Ministry of Time, and that one was, I think that one was, at first I had given it like 5 stars, and then I reread it last summer and I realized that it wasn't my favorite book after all. I think my tastes had really changed. So I gave it like 3 stars. And then I read Same Time Next Summer, and that one, just because it was a romance, was not my favorite book. So and then I have Spark of the Everflame, and I'm very much looking forward to reading that at some point. I have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. That one I'm looking forward to reading. Then I have Artemis by Andy Weir. I don't know if I am saying that correctly, but that book I'm looking forward to reading. I've heard that it's not as good as Project Hail Mary, so we'll see. And then I read Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry because I wanted to read that book because my husband and I have loved watching Friends, and then just like knowing his background and then how he passed away, I just wanted to read his book, and so I did. And I don't think I even rated it because it was just something I wanted to read for kind of like just for myself. And I read A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston, and I did feel a bit disappointed by that book. It was not my favorite book. And then I have The Prison Healer that I have not read. I have Light Lark that I have not read. I have A Court of Thorns and Roses that I have not read, and I am definitely going to go into that one holding my breath because I know it's pretty high spice levels, and so we'll see about that one. And I read The Love of My Afterlife, and it just wasn't really my favorite book. The romance was kind of cheesy in my opinion, and it was just kind of meh. I read The Happy Place by Emily Henry, and I don't know. I think I have an unpopular opinion because everybody loves this book so much, and I think it's probably just the fact that I'm not a romance girly too much. That was why I didn't really love it. Like, I'm sorry to anybody who does love that book, but we just don't have the same opinion, and that's okay. And I have Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is a fantasy author, and I really love the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy, so I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. And I have Homeseeking by Carissa Chen that I have not read, but I'm so looking forward to reading that. And I read The Fourth Turning. That was one that my husband had recommended to me, like a self-help type of book. And then I have Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I have the first 3 books, and the first one I did read, and the second 2 books the second and third book I have not read yet. So the first book, I remember I didn't really connect with the main characters because they were so young. It just felt a little bit far away from me emotionally, but overall I could tell the story writing was really good. Um, so hopefully I will finish that series someday. And I read Daisy Jones and the Six, and that was not my favorite book. I know that's probably another unpopular opinion, but I just couldn't connect with the characters. I just couldn't connect with the story, and it just wasn't for me. And I read The Husbands, and that book was awful. I did not like that book. It's basically the story of how this lady, she's single, and then one evening she comes home from a party or something and she finds a husband in her house. And so then she goes up into her attic, or she sends the husband up into the attic or something. And then another husband comes down. So basically, she can just replace a husband over and over and over again. And the thing that really did not sit well with me is the plot just went haywire. It just went into really weird places, and I did not like the ending. The character development felt really flat and stale, and I just, no, I didn't like it. And I read The Secret History. I did not love that book. It was so boring, and it was so long, and it was like you heard the main plot of the book within like the prologue. Like, you could read the prologue and be done with the book, in my opinion. Like, I didn't like it. That was my first 1-star book, actually. And I have Steel Heart by Brandon Sanderson. And I will say that one I'm very much looking forward to because it is a Brandon Sanderson book. And then I read a book that my sister-in-law actually published. She wrote and published, and that is Pure Blood Assassin. Very well done, very good. I would 100% read this again. And then I have The Forgotten Colony and Us Before Them. That is apparently sci-fi. Oh, it's raining outside. I should close the window. And this next book, I am very much looking forward to reading this book, and it is Watermoon. I don't know, the vibes just seem like they're going to be really cozy and just warm and fuzzy, and so I'm really looking forward to that book. And then I have The Martian, which I have not read yet, and that is Andy Weir as well. So that one is, we watched the movie of that one a while ago, and it's a guy who goes to Mars, and he ends up, oh, I can't even remember very well, but he ends up like growing potatoes. Literally, I can't remember anything else. I just remember the potatoes, but that was a good story though, and I'm looking forward to reading the book. And then I have Between Us, also by Vari McFarlane, and I did read that book, and that was another one that I didn't really enjoy it. Then I have Scythe, and I did not read that book yet, and I'm very much looking forward to reading it. And then I have Recursion by Blake Crouch. Have not read, but definitely looking forward to it. I have Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson. 100% looking forward to reading that book. And then I have Beneath a Scarlet Sky, which I have not read, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading it. And I don't really know anything about it besides it's something about war, I think. I could be wrong though. I'm not even sure about that. Then we have Renegades, which I have not read yet, but definitely looking forward to it. And then I had started reading The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black, and I ended up DNFing that one because it just got really dark, and I personally felt convicted that I should not continue, and so I stopped reading it. And I read When Monsters Lie and did not enjoy that book. I just did not enjoy the story, and just not my favorite book. And then I read, wait, no, I did not read this series yet, but there's Holes and Small Steps. So definitely a series I'm looking forward to. We did watch the movie Holes a while ago, and I felt like the movie was just a little bit cheesy, but hoping that the book will actually hold up to my expectations. And then we have Bridge Kingdom. I have not read that book yet, but definitely will be reading that sometime. And we have The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. Definitely looking forward to reading that one. Oh wow, there's thunder. I don't know if you can hear that. And then we have Babel that I did read last fall. And then, yeah, I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I read Good Girl, Bad Blood, and I don't know if I'm actually going to finish that series. I just don't think I'm interested enough, besides just not enjoying the thriller vibes. And then I have Dance of Thieves, which I have not read yet. I read Set for Life, which is another recommendation from my husband. And yeah, liked that book. I read The Unmaking of June Farrow. Definitely liked that book. Maybe I'll reread it one day. I might. And then I have The Kite Runner, and I have not read that book yet, but I've heard it's really sad, I think. And I have read Love Interest. Yeah, once again, just didn't really like that book because it was just hard for me to connect with the characters. And then I have Battle Angel Alita. This is actually really nostalgic to me because that was the first like sci-fi movie that my husband showed me. That was while we were dating, and he wanted to show me that movie, and it was just like so like cute and nostalgic for me that I just wanted to read the book, which I actually think there are multiple books, and I think that it's a comic book if I'm not mistaken. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading that someday. Then I read The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, and I actually forgot what was in the book, but I did enjoy it for the most part, and it's just following some ladies in England who were cracking codes and fooling the Germans, the Nazis in the war, and it was definitely a very interesting read, and I would highly recommend it. Then we have Red Rising. I have Red Rising and Golden Sun, which is the second book in the series. I have not read either of them, but very much looking forward to it. And then I have Beartown by Frederick Bachman, and I did not really enjoy that book very much. Then I have The Eye of the World, and I have not read that book yet. I have Ender's Game, which I have not read yet. Then I have Red Queen, and I think that's a series, but I just have the first one. Then I read Snow Crash. That was actually my last read of 2025, and I did not enjoy that book. I gave it a 1 star, and I know that it was a book that was super popular and it was rather groundbreaking for its time, but not for me. And then I have the Inheritance Games. I have not read it, but definitely looking forward to that one day. Then I have the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy. So I have the Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin, but I do not have Assassin's Quest, which is the third one. I did read it by borrowing it from the library, but yeah, I definitely want to buy it someday. And I definitely enjoyed that series. And then I have My Friends by Frederick Bachman, but I DNF'd that book. I'm just not a Frederick Bachman fan, and I know that a lot of people love him, but it's just not for me. And there were just some other things. I couldn't connect with those characters in particular. I did not like them. I didn't like the story. I was bored, and I just didn't want to keep going. So we did not keep going with that book. We are down to the last few, I promise. So then I have The Stolen Kingdom, which is a retelling of Aladdin, and that one was not my favorite book. I don't know, maybe I was in a slump. I just am not sure, but I just had to DNF it. I was bored. I'm sorry. I just didn't like that book. And then I read The Esther Mantle by Christy Johnston. Definitely liked that book. And then I have a series, part of a series by Brandon Sanderson, Skyward and Starsight, and I have not read them, but very much looking forward to that. And then I have the series that made me fall in love with Brandon Sanderson, which is The Way of Kings. We have The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, and then I have Oathbringer on my shelf in paperback form, so we'll be reading this soon. And I have the series Ready Player One and Ready Player Two. Definitely loved Ready Player One, did not love Ready Player Two. It just felt like a copy paste in some ways, and then in other ways, I could tell that the author truly was trying to get out of the box, but somehow the whole entire thing just felt like a stroll through the countryside and not like a mad dash to get free. I was like, this just is so slow. How are they even making any progress? So did not love it. And I have Project Hail Mary. And that book, I loved it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I loved the movie. I will say that. I loved the movie. And the book was just a little bit boring, in my opinion, at some points. So, yeah. And then we have Unlocking Wealth from the Courts of Heaven. That one was interesting. I liked that book. Then we have Shadow and Bone, which I did read. I had borrowed it from the library and then I ended up buying it on my Kindle, and then I also got Siege and Storm, and I'm going to be reading that sometime in the near future. And then the last book that I have, which I think I just bought it yesterday, and that is Wild Dark Shore. And I am very much looking forward to reading that book. I'm very excited about it. So anyways, that is a wrap of 142 books on my Kindle, and I'm very excited to continue reading. I'm excited to go through this journey with you guys, and I love that you're here. I love making these videos, and so yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.